So thank you all for coming today. The people on the call are community leaders from the Almeda fire, CZU Lightning Complex fire. And I'm so pleased to introduce you to a colleague who I greatly admire and absolutely love working alongside for the first like 2.5 years post-disaster. Debbie Mason has made a marked and important difference in our entire community. And that means that she actually set up a system that was able to provide access, whether or not people took it, but a lot of people actually took her up on it, to mental health care, trauma-informed mental health care for every person in Sonoma County. For those of you who are unaware, we have almost 500,000 people in our county, so this was no small feat. She paid special attention to, for some reason, Melissa, I think it's recording just you. It's odd. I'm not sure what that's about. Anyway, Debbie has moved back to her home state of Florida, and she has opinions on hurricanes versus wildfires. But she truly is one of the people who I just have loved working, most admire, and her innovation in the face of disaster has been really important, and her ability to bring people to the table has been critical to our success. So welcome, Debbie.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hello, everybody. I appreciate you dialing in, and I hope I share some information that's helpful. And I want to just say I'm there with you in spirit. Jennifer and I are walking the path with you, along with many other people who send you lots of positive light and energy for your current journey and the steps that you will be doing in the future. I'm usually not a PowerPoint person, but some of our partners did a really good job of putting together a presentation that we gave at the American Psychologist Association meeting in June. And I thought it might be helpful for you just to get the lens of why we did what we did and who was involved. And then Jennifer can send this out to you afterwards if you want it. And it does have the reason I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but it's got a lot of clinical data of why we did what we did and what the early results of that were. So I'll just start by saying, today I'm president of a foundation in Florida that supports hospice, but my journey in California started in 2016 when I moved to Sonoma County to become CEO of the Healthcare Foundation Northern Sonoma County. And that foundation had a lens around health access and mental health and early childhood development, with a particular lens of disadvantaged populations that had higher needs. And we looked at those as, of the 10 pressing issues in Sonoma County, 3 that if we could address them appropriately for children while they were younger and for families, that would extend the life and well-being and health of folks on their journey for however long their journey lasts here. So that's why our foundation chose those. So we had focused on mental health even before the fires. We were trying to figure out what we would fund. We were not a direct service provider, so that's an important distinction. Like Jennifer's group, we're a funder, convener, leader, and the Healthcare Foundation was not a direct service provider. I think that helped us in a lot of ways because we weren't identified with a particular service niche, and we really did have a broad view of the whole county. We had been doing lots of convenings in the mental health space, so we had a sense for who was already in that space. And we had also been doing a lot of convenings around who was doing services for asset limited families. And so we had a sense of who was doing food, who was doing housing, who was doing health, nutrition, all of those pieces. So I'm going to share my screen and whiz through part of this deck. It's a really long deck, so I'm not going to do the whole thing. But I have to give significant kudos to Dr. Adrienne Hines, because she was the mastermind of several of the key interfaces of what we did in terms of the tactics. So this is a presentation that we did to the statewide conference. So want to just start with our objectives. We realized we couldn't do everything for everybody. So our objectives for that presentation were sharing how we built what we thought was a community-wide collaboration for culturally competent and evidence-informed mental health resources and services. And those two things were really important to us. We can't just put something out there that's Spanish language. We need to go to the community, and it needs to be culturally competent and culturally sensitive. And then we talked about our launch and dissemination. This is just a little history. October 2017, at that point, it was the worst wildfire in the state. We've had several others that have taken that award since then. But needless to say, it was for folks in Sonoma County, last minute, very urgent, very destructive, and most people were impacted in the middle of the night while sleeping, which adds, by the way, a layer of trauma, as I'm sure many of you know. So a lot of people, the survivor stories were about, I was in my pajamas, I barely had time to grab my pet. A lot of people did not have time to grab their pets. And the trauma involved in losing everything and losing your pet, very, very significant. On top of that, we had multiple evacuations, which layers the trauma, and a lot of land involved. And it did occur in our peak tourist season and peak harvest season. And honestly, my friends who run the tourism bureau there said tourism still hasn't recovered because of the repeat fires. And I imagine some of you are feeling those things in your regions too. So impact, this was really important, and we actually have later data than this, but 1/3 of the people 3 months after the 2003 fires screened positive for depression, and 1/4 for PTSD, 3 months after the 2003 Southern California fires. So what we did was we went and said, where's the body of knowledge on post-disaster mental health effects? And in 2017, this was literally all we could find in America, because Americans hadn't been quite as good as studying that. Boy, we are now, right? But prior to 2017, this was literally all we could find, a couple of different studies from 2003 fires and from Hurricane Harvey. But obviously, intuitively, we know that people will have mental health effect. Interestingly, there have been very few longitudinal studies on what happens to kids who live through a traumatic experience like this. How are those mental health conditions rooted in their early childhood, and what is the path of that development over time? And can we have interventions that are positive in that trajectory path? So good data here. I won't go through it all. It'll be in the deck if you want to see it. We also knew that there were stigmas to accessing care. First of all, just a stigma of, I don't need a shrink, I don't need help, mental health, oh, no, I'm fine. We also knew in Sonoma County, we didn't have enough providers before the fire. And then after the fire, we sure didn't have enough providers. And interestingly enough, what you'll learn is you can't take the normal approach of therapeutic response. You have to understand trauma response, and that's different. So we trained more than 450 mental health providers over a 3-year period on skills for psychological recovery, so they understood trauma responsive mental health versus ongoing therapeutic. And then language barriers and cultural barriers. So how did this start? That's me, and I picked up the phone, literally, and called all the people I had recently been meeting with around the topic of mental health to say, We don't have the answer, but we'll commit to raising the money. You guys are the mental health experts. Get in a room with us. Tell me and my board what we need to do to respond to mental health needs in the community. So we met a few weeks and then came up with these objectives. We knew we wanted it to be countywide, although I'll pause and say we were a teeny little foundation with only the scope of northern Sonoma County prior fires. But in our hearts, we knew that people had suddenly moved boundaries in their evacuation, and that North County, where we sat, had just subsumed hundreds of the evacuee families at all income level, by the way, and that we had to make this countywide. So we also wanted to democratize access. And what we meant by that was, regardless of your income level, you needed to understand that you could have mental health consequences and that it was okay to call yourself a survivor and to access these services, whether you had lost anything in the fire or not. And that was an important distinction. Anybody who felt like they were in need could access our services, because a lot of people with PTSD might have just evacuated and got to go home. They didn't lose their house at all. But the prolonged period of time for the fire incident and the repeat evacuations was really chaotic on our community. Also, this was important to us. It may not be important to you. We raised an extra $100,000 and paid Stanford because we wanted to try to measure what we did and add to the knowledge base. So the next folks that went out there and said, who's done some evidence-based responses, might find us in the literature with a little bit of what we did. Not that that's a big amount to spend on research, but it at least was something to try to measure what we did. So these were the strategies, and all of these were bilingual strategies. I told you about training the mental health therapist across the board. By the way, that could be an RN, an LPN, a school psychologist, a counselor aide. We did not define that at all. If they were a licensed provider, they could get CEs. If they were a non-licensed provider, they were invited in as well. We also encouraged the frontline folks in the building departments, in the social services agencies that might not be mental health professionals, but were the recipient of a lot of that caller or visitor angst, to come and learn these skills as well, as much for themselves as everybody else. We wanted to increase access to the care that was available, so we funded NAMI. Everybody has a NAMI chapter probably for your region, and people could call or text or chat with them about getting a warm referral to any of the free services or any other services in the community that addressed ongoing mental health needs. We funded free counseling and community outreach. It's interesting. This was something we learned. We thought we'd have more bandwidth with private therapists, but because there's such a shortage in Sonoma County of mental health professionals, particularly those that are Spanish language skilled, we actually ended up spending far more money with nonprofit organizations that had therapeutic components and paying them to provide group and individual therapy to people. So a pivot that you could learn from is, who are your nonprofit partners in the community that are already doing some kind of mental health services, and how could you fund them for a part of their book of business just for fire survivors, and then train them in skills for psychological recovery so they understand the method to help those folks. A really unique thing we did, and we got a lot of interesting press on this. Actually, I had a woman this is a funny conversation. So there are funny things that happen in disasters. People were calling us from around the country. Oh, you're talking about mental health. What are you doing? What are you doing? I'd get to yoga and they go, we're in Iowa. Nobody's going to do yoga here. And what I'd say to them is, I promise you, this is not yoga for bodybuilding. This is peaceful, restful, trauma-informed yoga and meditation. Our oldest person was in his mid 80s, had never done yoga before, and literally on TV said, "This saved my life. This helped me regain my focus and calm me enough that I literally feel like it saved my life physically." So we trained more than 60 yoga instructors on providing trauma-informed yoga and eye rest meditation. And we were really lucky. We happened to have one of the creators internationally of eye rest meditation who lived in Sonoma County. But you probably have folks in your communities that have been certified. If not, it's worth it to you to pay them to get the certification so they can come back and teach others. We did a public media campaign, and we were so fortunate. The publisher of the Sonoma newspaper is an amazing human being, and he and our local senator and the local head of a big credit union had raised a lot of money on their own for immediate needs, food, shelter, all those kinds of things. But they recognized that mental health was going to be important. And so they hosted, the first time this has ever been done in the San Francisco Bay Area, a meeting for all of the local media, and all of the local media agreed to do a 4-to-1 match. If we paid them for one ad at a nonprofit rate, they would match that at least 4 times. I have to tell you that the Press Democrat probably matched that 100 times. Every single day for months and months and months, they ran a giant ad saying, if you need help, here are all the free things you can get. So I would encourage you to find a media advocate like Steve was for us with the Press Democrat that will convene and literally peer pressure the other media folks to do the right thing. The interesting thing is they want to do the right thing. They're just not sure what that is sometimes. So when you can present to them, here, this is a community collaboration of all these free services, and we've raised enough money to buy a little bit of advertising, they will respond in like kind. Part of the public media campaign wasn't just here's how to access these services. It was saying, hey, it's normal to feel really crappy right now. It's normal to have fuzzy mind. It's normal to be anxious. We were trying to normalize the symptoms of distress so that people would feel okay admitting that they needed help. So the ad campaign also, we did posters in buses, we did bus benches, we did billboards, we did every kind of media we could find, and we showed all different kinds of ages and walks of life and ethnicity, to try to say to everybody, look, no matter who you are, no matter how old you are, if you're gay or straight, or if you're 10 or you're 100, it's okay. It's okay to be normal, to admit you need help. And then we built a website. The Colorado Fire folks had developed a really good website. We linked off their platform, and then Adrian, Dr. Hines, developed Sonoma Rises as a mobile app for adults and teen, and I'll talk about that in a little while. That app was really key for us. So our approach was really grassroots. We also said from day one, and we connected with FEMA early on, the local county team that was responsible for implementing FEMA, and said, we don't want to duplicate what you do. We want to wrap around what you do. And so the FEMA team did a lot of great things. You know, they're allowed to go out and connect with people up to 5 visits. They're allowed to do some small interventions with them, and then they would hand those folks off into our system to access some of that care. And conversely, when people would call us and ask for things we couldn't do, we would hand them either through NAMI or through the FEMA team to the other services. We also partnered with our long-term recovery team, so we were able to refer people into them. We partnered with the United Way to refer people into them. And then as the community partnership grew and different people and organizations took, as I said to Jennifer today, different pieces of the quilt, we made sure we knew how to refer into everybody. But our job was to fundraise, to implement those 6 strategies that you saw, and to connect with everybody and then measure the effectiveness. So I told you a little bit about us. we really wanted to be a good partner. So when we sat around that table, what we said is we need to have really clear role definition because nobody has time to waste time. And we need to work from a strength-based system. We don't know it all, no one knows it all, and no one can do it all. And as Jennifer has said many, many times, you know, there may be an I in the word disaster, but there's no I in the team approach to disaster afterwards. Everybody has a role, and no role is more important than the others. So we really wanted to focus on that. And we had really great communications. There were things we screwed up. Sometimes one partner accidentally got ahead of the other partners. And, you know, you have to have trust. You just have to have good trust. So our motto was assume good intentions. Everybody's moving ahead at the speed of light, trying to implement, assume good intentions. If somebody left you off an email, don't take it personally, assume good intentions, pick up and move on. And that really helped us. So our biggest learning was, you know, if you build it, they will come. That is not true with mental health services. If you build it, they're not going to come even if they know about it for a long time. That was disappointing to us. We anticipated it would take 6 months or so. It took a lot longer. And so, you know, in the learning from that, we should have raised more money and had our media campaign run a lot longer. You know, if I had to go back and do it over again, that would be what I would do. I'd keep that media campaign running for a couple of years till people were sick of it. But the reality is people don't pay attention to it until they need it. And they need it at different times. Some people recognize they need it immediately and they go get it. Most people tough it up. And a lot of people in our focus group said this to us, give it to someone else. Somebody else needs it more than I do. It was this like selfless, I'm okay, I'll get through it. Somebody else is going to need it more than me. I don't want to take a space from someone who needs it more than me. We also wanted to make sure we reach teens and reach the Latinx community. Sonoma County has a bifurcated economy, much like other areas of California. Very wealthy, very poor, not much in the middle. And so a lot of our teens, Sonoma County is very rural, and there aren't a lot of resources for teens for productive after school experiences. Most of our high schools aren't very large and don't have a lot of extracurricular positive things for them. So we were starting behind anyway and not being a large metropolitan area with a lot of things for kids to do. So we wanted to make sure we reached the teens. The Latinx community in our region, heavy, about 27 to 30% variable in the county, depending on which city, of Latinx, and on top of that, a significant undocumented, uncounted community of Spanish language only families. So this is just some examples of the collateral materials we did. Our slogan was finding our new normal together. This is actually the media ads look like this as well. We took care to get these out to social service providers who work with undocumented folks, as well as other service providers with the Latinx community. And we also took care to try to put these, we had what I call a guerrilla campaign. We basically paid a high schooler all summer long to go everywhere he could, neighborhood by neighborhood, every day a different neighborhood, and get these in bodegas and anywhere else, hairdressers, anywhere else he could for our guerrilla campaign to try to just get it out there. So lessons learned, fundraising takes a lot longer than you think it will, particularly for mental health. So what happens after a disaster, everybody's focused on immediate needs, not too many focused on mental health. Mental health is a very long-term lift and needs a lot of money. You know, I talked to you about that survivor's guilt. Interestingly, that happened for funders too. Like, well, how long do we have to do this? You know, why are you asking me for more money? We already did this for a while. And just getting people to understand that grief happens in waves. It doesn't happen in a linear process. And trauma happens in nuggets. You know, you get a nugget in front of you, you try to digest it and do something with it, and then you're okay for a little while until another nugget or trigger happens. So just trying to explain that to folks who aren't savvy about mental health. So I'm not going to go through all this, but this is the science of what we did. So this deck will give you the science. If you need to get in front of a funder to say, why is this strategy the right strategy? These are the papers. This is the process of why you want to move through with best practices in post-disaster. So you start with psychological first aid. That's when I'm in the shelter and the Red Cross is putting a shirt on my back and giving me food. Then you want to move up to skills for psychological recovery. That's when a trained mental health practitioner is helping me box out the situation and cope with the situation step by step. And then moving to these other pieces that will help in healing. So the other thing we tried to say to people about SPR is it's not an ongoing mental health treatment. It's a way to get through the disaster and deal with your current pressing real life issues. And then as it helps you reduce distress and improve your coping skills, you can then sort through where you are in your healing process and do you need ongoing therapeutic support. So this is just a bunch of information about the literature review and how it's supported and the goals of SPR. It's really a prevention strategy. You want to catch people where they are, box out where they are, give them some strategies to deal with what's in that box and prevent them from further degrading and help them learn some adaptive positive practices. And these are the core skills that you learn in SPR. And then this is some research. Our goal was to get to 500. We got to just below 500 right before I left. So I was really, really pleased with that. And we did have interventions with groups and schools and government agencies and nonprofits. We trained people across every spectrum, from neighborhood leaders to doctors and psychologists. And then this is just data about people who did participate in, this is from an early study that we did, people who participated in the SPR training. Interestingly, a lot of the professionals that came to the training had lost their houses or had been evacuated themselves. So they kind of had two lenses when they were going through the training, the lens of professional and, oh, I could see how this would apply in my own life, given what I've gone through. So off those early trainings, 59% said, yes, I benefited, I'll keep going. And, you know, nearly 80%, actually more than 80%, strongly agreed that it was clear and understandable and would help their clients, you know, so you can see the data there. So our digital health mental interventions, we were very lucky. Dr. Adrienne Hines worked for the Veterans Administration as a digital psychologist for improving outcomes for veterans who are suffering from PTSD. So talk about having a great local specialist right there. So we started with My Sonoma Strong, and that was the website. This was in English and Spanish, and it was auditory as well as visual. So you could read it or you could click and hear it, because we recognize that during trauma, people have different nodes to which they process better, and we wanted to be able to hit both of those. And this was our team of clinical psychologists who helped us develop the tools. Our team of translators. It was really important to us that everything be culturally appropriate, not just linguistically appropriate. And then this is just some screenshots of Sonoma Rises, which was the app. So you can see on the left here, you could enter with, what are you feeling right now? Stress, loss, disconnection, Or if you're a teen, click right here for the teen intervention. And the teen intervention, as you might suspect, was much more interactive, less reading, more audio, more pop quiz kind of approaches. Or you could tune in and just listen. So you could pick what you wanted to listen to. You didn't have to read, you could just listen to messaging. Or you could pick what you wanted to learn about. Or what I love on the far right is just click on a mood. This is how I'm feeling right now, help me. So we gave people lots of ways to enter the app. And we did a lot of promotion about the app, and we had a lot of we had 2 really good studies in high schools with teens using the app. And what was interesting was they started using it because of the fire. They continued using it because the skills in there helped them cope with everyday stressors too. So, you know, what we learned from that is there may be a good application for bullying in apps because kids really respond to the apps. So again, just some, if you wanted to track your activities, you could set up these different logs. You didn't have to do that, but if you actually wanted to set up an account and set up a log, you could. And when people went up to set in their log, we asked them, would you be willing to let us monitor you for part of our post-disaster research? A good number of people said sure, which was surprising, actually. So these are the kinds of things we monitored over time. And then we gave them resources. So if you feel like you're in a crisis, if you need more mobile apps, if you want apps for our community, you want to know who's on the team and how to reach them. And then if you're a vet, let's connect you to services just for vets. So we tried to really connect to the larger landscape of folks out there. So we did a lot of outreach initially. Again, we didn't, this probably doesn't list half of the outreaches we did. And then this is the research. We had a grant through Stanford for these 2 folks to help us research, and we were researching each of the elements as best we could. I'm going to pause and say, here's another learning. It's very difficult to get people to fill out surveys when they're experiencing the yoga, even though they will verbally tell you how much it meant to them. Very, very difficult. It's like, well, you can catch them up front and they might tell you how they feel up front, but at the end, they're just so mellow. They just want to go and get in their car. They don't want to stop for that survey. So we struggled a little bit with that. I'm not sure how to fix that, actually. We got a few, but nothing near what we thought we would get. So we started going out and doing kind of, well, it is a research methodology. It's called an intercept methodology. And we literally were accosting people as they came out of yoga and trying to get some testimonials from them. So the other challenge we had is it took us so long to raise the funds. When we got enough money, we'd launch a tactic. We saved the research for the very end because even though you want research, it's hard to put that money first when people are hurting. So we had already launched a lot of our tactics before we actually raised the money to do the research, which was kind of sad in a way, because if we had done a better job of raising that money earlier, we could have started the research from day one, which we didn't get to do. And I'm not going to go through all this, but in this deck, it tells you what our goals were for the digital with teens and where the point of intervention was. I know they finished a survey later than this deck that had more data in it, but this just shows you the baselines and the interventions, and we had to get parental consent if they were under a certain age. So anyway, there's really good data in here about how there were improvements for those who participated in the survey. We did have some national and international media that talked about what we did. And then we were really pleased that folks paid attention on the anniversary of the fire, which was a trigger point. So that was the other thing we wanted to do was, can we anticipate triggers and can we make sure that people still know how to get to the services when there's a trigger. So in our area, if the wind picked up, that was a huge trigger for people because we don't usually have wind, and winds were the precursor to the fire. So winds were a big trigger. This is Dr. Hines talking to television, and this is just sampling of the media that we tried to get the message out to people so more people would take advantage of the free services. So I think that's it. I'll stop sharing. And I do have one other thing I do want to share, another little deck here just of the partners, because we're often asked, how do you get these partners and who are these partners and how do you find them? So let me just go here. Oh, sorry. Let me answer your questions while I'm closing down some stuff, and then I'll go to the partners. Questions,
Okay.
thoughts?
Well, how about this? While you're doing that, I will have the people who are, so this is the smallest call we've had, which is fine, actually, because it means that we'll go more in depth. I'm going to identify the people on the call. So Tucker, why don't you introduce yourself, and then we'll go all the way around, and then as you want to ask questions, we can do that. Tucker?
Okay, yeah, so I'm Tucker. I'm the Executive Director of Remake Talent, which is a new organization in response to the Almeda fires, and incredibly empowered by Jennifer's visit to us a few months ago, and I always find these calls very useful. There's a few people on here that I've invited that have shown up, and I'm really great. It's really great to see them. Oh, and I'll have to go in a few minutes to take my kid to a haircut appointment, but I'm gonna leave my my Zoom running so we can get some notes captured.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tucker. Alicia?
I am a mental health therapist in LCSW, and have been in the throes of trying to create a center to hold space for people who are surviving the fires here, as well as just those who have been impacted by evacuation and other traumas that we've experienced in this last year. And also really grateful for your work, because I am from Sonoma County, and so your services were helpful for so many of my community members. So I just want to say that as well.
Great.
Thank you. Jen Harp? Okay, Janet?
Actually, it's Janae.
Oh, I'm sorry, Janae.
That's okay. Well, I'm an Almeda survivor, but I am in, actually after the first few weeks, I called SAMHSA's disaster, hotline, helpline. And I was upset, but I wasn't rude in my voice. I wasn't angry. The person hung up on me. So I don't think, and that was my first time reaching out. I have a son who's chronically ill, who uses lots of services, but I am concerned that we have good services and services that are really sensitive to the populations, that I taught ESL in the Medford School District. And I'm aware a lot of people think they know, the other culture, but they really don't, and they need to be informed, because otherwise we're going to miss a lot of people, because it's not culturally appropriate.
Absolutely. Thank you, Janae. Laura Lee?
Hi, guys. I'm also a CZU fire survivor. And I've just, from day one, I was participating in different things just because mental health of the community is probably my #1 concern post-disaster. I mean, we'll all process grief in time, and we'll replace our things, but the effects of the trauma and the triggers that I'm seeing in the neighbors and in the behaviors that I'm seeing and how people are treating each other it's been concerning. I mean, there's some amazing things happening, but then there's some very upsetting things that are happening. So I've just been trying to keep a pulse on what's going on so I can share resources and use my voice to destigmatize and share, like, I'm all in, whatever you guys can help with. I'm happy to receive help. And so that people know, like, I'm just a normal person. It's fine. It's all good. So that's why I'm here.
I love that, Laura Lee. And Debbie, you can talk about how important it is for the helpers to also get help and to not feel stigmatized by that. I know she mentioned it a few times, like they didn't want to stand in line. We both know people who've not, made it through all the way to 3 years later without having significant mental health issues, people who were very big helpers. Very important thing to do. Susie Garcia?
Yes, hi, my name is Susie Garcia, and I am participating in the community as a volunteer with the Rogue Valley Mutual Aid, which is composed of 5 different organizations who sit on the steering committee, plus a lot of other organizations who are collaborating partners. And I have been focused mostly on housing and advocacy. I have a degree in psychology and 5 years of professional experience with advocacy as an advocate. And I also speak Spanish. I'm bilingual. So I figured that this would be a really helpful way to provide support and help to our community during this time of crisis and this time of need. And I find the information that's here so valuable. I want more. So thank you for offering this opportunity.
Oh, thank you, Susie. Rebecca?
Hi, I don't have the best cell service right now, so apologies if it cuts out. I've been working with Santa Cruz Relief really since the fires started. We were kind of born as a mutual aid, and really what we've been doing is just acting as catchers and ensuring that people don't fall through the cracks and identifying where there are cracks that need more support. And definitely mental health has been one of those areas. My background in mental health is not extensive, but I was doing trauma-informed care, working with refugees overseas, and it's interesting, there's a lot of similar correlations. So some of the amazing therapists that we've worked with for refugee crisis and people who have supported in Sonoma County after the fires have also stepped up and are willing to do some support and counseling locally for the CZU fire survivors. And yeah, just really grateful for all the resources you guys are sharing. Yeah, and knowing it's just really the beginning. I think people right now have just really started recognizing in this holiday season. I'm getting a lot of messages, especially from families and individuals that are finally starting to step out and reach out for the help that they need. So grateful for that as well.
Thank you, Rebecca. Jen? Jen Harp?
Oh.
There she is. Okay.
My name is Jennifer Harper. I should probably change my name on there now that I'm doing so many Zooms. Sorry about that. I am a Almeda fire survivor in Phoenix, Oregon. Currently, I am housed with my family, which is great. There's a lot of my friends that are not housed. I've been working on a project which is the Phoenix Rising Fire Relief. We just started, but it's more so to offer hope to individuals with the beautiful artwork that was created by a local international artist that came through. And so I've been working on that to try to raise money, and it hit a key that it's hard to raise money, especially for small organizations, but we do have larger organizations here that are really helping not only myself, but other survivors. I've also been working with a local group to start doing, I don't know, Tucker, I think might have talked, but to start doing zone captains so that we can start rebuilding our neighborhoods. And I lived in a small subdivision that was all what they call stick homes, but we're all homeowners, so we were insured. And I think the biggest thing right now is the insured, underinsured, and also insured. We are not going the FEMA route. We've decided to just start our rebuild right away. And it's been great, but it also is very concerning with a lot of our neighbors in our community that don't have that option because they have no insurance. I think that my biggest thing is that I live in a small town, and I love my small town. I love my Latino community. I love the diversity that we have. And I think my biggest concern is that we're not going to be able to get it back.
Hey, Jen. Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally hear you. Jody.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. I don't know what's going on with my camera. We'll just forget about that. I'm with SC Relief as well, working with Rebecca, and really feeling a huge uptick in mental health necessities, people reaching out, asking, especially on Facebook groups. I see a lot of activity asking, you know, for links, for help, for numbers to call. And I'm just wondering, is there a really good way to get hooked up with county resources, or is it best to go the community route? Because I have been sharing a link to the county resources, but I'm just not quite sure. I want people to have a good first experience reaching out, and I'm just a little scared that that might not be the case with a county level mental health, you know, office. So hoping to get some feedback on that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We did Susie. Danny? Thank you, Jody.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danny. I'm here representing My Valley, My Home here in the Rogue Valley, but I'm also really interested in this particular subject as just a person who's also doing circles with young people, many of whom have been impacted by the fire, and also just in the context of this sort of double crisis that we're having with the pandemic as well. I just think that, yeah, I'm really grateful to hear about some of the resources that have already been mentioned here. And I just think this is such an important conversation and is relevant to pretty much every aspect of what I'm doing personally. Like, all of the work that I'm doing is, yeah, it's so important. Mental health is huge right now. So I'm just, yeah, lots of gratitude from my end. And also I wanted to mention that, yeah, like one of the things that My Valley, My Home is working to do is make these sorts of meetings and the information that's being shared accessible to sort of help disseminate that information. So yeah, I'm looking forward to helping get this particular conversation out, get it translated to be shared with, you know, bilingual folks or non-English speakers, and yeah, all that. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Danny. One thing we can do is we work with you directly, sending you the raw file so you can have it translated and it can be a voiceover. If that works for you, we're happy to work with you on that.
That would be wonderful.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks,
totally. Jen. Oh, happy to do that. And then Misty.
Hi, I just want to say thank you for the voiceover, because that is the #1 conversation that we're having with the nearly 70% of the Almeda fire survivors who are Latinx in our community. I also am a fire survivor, and my daughter is currently in therapy. This is her second fire she's been through. We had a house fire when she was 6. So this is a lot for us. And I know how to deal with trauma through yoga and breath work. And I'm grateful to be hearing that yoga is being talked about. And I feel really inspired now to reach out to a bicultural, bilingual woman who actually is trained in trauma yoga, and see about how we can get grant funding through maybe NAMI or the other organization that I would like named again that is chaptered in the US, and maybe even with FEMA, because she works with veterans and this is her forte. And she'll also be able to work with stigmatizing it. And yeah, it's really important. I've done a lot of crying and I've done a lot of processing myself, and I really appreciate that this conversation is happening to help normalize it, so that we can go back out in our community and say it's okay. And I already have been doing that. I've already been in contact with several people about trauma acupuncture, trauma, counselors. So this feels very confirmed, especially with Tucker wanting to get a container mental health crisis center set up. And then this is also inspiring for getting something set up in front of the shops in Phoenix, which is one of the relief centers, where we can have this insulated like pop-up tent thing that can have the door open and 6 feet apart with a little heater. So folks, if they kind of are like, timid, but not sure, but they can like keep coming back, and there will be Spanish speaking counselors there and English, and just something that is like right there as they're going in for resources to meet their basic needs. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Misty. Let's do this. Debbie, do you want to do your presentation, and then we'll go to questions, your second piece?
Yeah, let me respond to a little bit of what
Okay.
I've heard, and then I'll
I'm going to let you take it from
the other pieces. So I want to talk about how we reached populations, and a couple of you alluded to that. So we didn't expect our undocumented folks to go to social services agencies that were new. We reached out to social service agencies that were already serving them and said, how can we have a therapist there? How can we have a group night session there? How can we, when people are coming in to get food, how can we have information there to guide them to other services? Will you partner with us in letting us bring the services to your facility to serve the folks you're serving? And we had good luck with that. So we recognized early on that it was going to be hard enough to get people over the stigma of asking for help. And so we needed to make it easy to get the help. So we contracted with nonprofits that were already doing services and said, this may be a little bit out of your wheelhouse, but we want to contract with you to do it. And then if we need to bring a provider in to do it with your population and you're a trusted team member, we will. And so that was really important to us, to not assume that we knew everything, and to go to the partners that did know, that were already boots on the ground with key populations, and say, look, we know the data shows this will work, but we need to get it to people. And you're the front door to people who are really going to need it. We also, we made sure that we reached into the schools over and over and over again. And they frankly shut the doors on us for months. We don't need you. We don't need you. We've got our own. We don't need you. And they really did need us. And so we were able to show them the app. We were able to ask if we could use the app in the schools. We were able to identify clubs and groups that would test the app for us, give feedback as teens on the app. And it was interesting. We made a point of saying, don't just give us the National Honor Society, give us the kids that are in truancy, give us the kids that are already experiencing trauma in real life, and let's see if this tool provides any help at all. So we were very deliberate in saying, let's identify every door to a population in the community. And obviously we couldn't touch all of those, but how do we get to them? I also want to respond on one thing you guys were asking about, can you find the Sonoma Rises app? You can't. Here's another lesson learned. That app cost us about $150,000 to develop. It would have cost us $1 million to develop it as a proprietary app and own it. And that is because if you're not an app developer, you have to have the software, you have to constantly update it, you have to constantly do all this stuff to it. And when we looked at what it would cost us to do the app over a 10-year period, it was about $1 million. And we said, our community can't sustain that, and we can't find the grants for that. So unfortunately, our app only had a shelf life as long as that app developer was around. Well, he reached out in 2019 and said, I'm selling my business. Do you want to buy this platform from us? We said, no, we're a not-for-profit. We can't really afford that. You know, would you continue it as a good community service? He probably would have, but the people buying him had no interest. They were big conglomerate from somewhere. So lesson learned, if you're going to develop an app, you're going to be in the same situation we were. You're going to have a shelf life of a couple of years. And if you're in an area with repeat fires, you might want to figure out how do you partner in a different way. So Dr. Hines went on to develop this COVID coach app, and it has many of the same exact tools. And so now we refer people to that. It doesn't say fire on it specifically, but many of the same things people are experiencing with COVID are loss and trauma. Are there any specific questions y'all want to ask for me? And Danny, I see your point. Eventually we got into the schools, but we had to find the right person to open those doors. And so eventually we developed relationships with the superintendents of the individual school districts and talked to them about the evidence base. And what we learned from them is 500 people a week knock on their door with something that would be good for kids. They literally get overwhelmed by well-meaning people who have 90% of them have something really interesting and good. They don't have the bandwidth to sort through it all. And so it just took a while of building trust and for them to see how big it was in the community to trust that it was going to be a real thing that they could offer to the kids and the families. So, and I would say it's only been the last 5 years in the Sonoma County region that mental health has bubbled up to the degree that it's bubbled up within the school systems. And maybe we were living in a bubble where we just didn't have those incidents to that degree, or we just weren't aware of it. But I think probably the year before the fires, we started looking at what we were going to fund in the schools around mental health, but the fires just kick-started, and all of a sudden the schools did realize, wow, this is exacerbating an underlying issue that we didn't quite recognize was at that degree already.
Thank you, Debbie. Does anybody want to ask questions now and she can finish with her presentation? Alicia, did you have a question?
Yeah,
I see you unmuted.
I
Go ahead.
have one question. The other ones I kind of posted, and thank you for responding, Jennifer. You had mentioned that the timeline for people accessing services, and I've read a little bit of the studies out of Florida. I think the Kaiser one that you mentioned. And you were talking about accessing services and how 6 months was kind of early. And I was just curious about like what the timeline really looked like as I'm like trying to formulate a plan to support our already inundated mental health system here and trying to like roll out a timeline and strategic plan for services. I just was wondering if you had any feedback, you know, with the percentage of the population that was accessing care at 6 months versus a year versus a year and a half, if those studies are there or reporting is there.
You know, I think because we didn't have the research money up front, we didn't have good tracking those early months. So I would be guessing, Alicia, to try to give you a number. What I would say to you is if I had it to do over, learning from the first out of the gate response, I think we were right in our strategy of let's get the website up, and while we're developing the app, let's start the skills for psychological training. But the reality is you can only do that with a couple of hundred people at once in a giant ballroom. And so that literally, it took us, you know, 2.5, 3 years to do 450-ish professionals, just because it takes that long. It's a 2-day training. And getting people, you've got to give them advance notice. They've got to get there. They've got to do the training. I would have started that a pinch earlier, because I did not anticipate how long it would take to get it organized and get people there, even after I had identified the trainers. And we can send you the trainers. They're awesome. They are 2 of the 10 people that developed the international model, and they travel the world. This is what they do. In fact, I just had a trainer come to Sarasota virtually to do the training for our community. In anticipation, we're doing some stuff in advance. The other thing I would say to you is different things appeal to different people. It was rare that we found someone who had done multiple methodologies. Some people only did the app. Some people only did yoga. Some people only looked for an SPR trained therapist. Sometimes the therapist would say, I'm going to use the app with you to have a dual modality. Sometimes the therapist would send them to the yoga iRest. But most of the time on their own, people tend to gravitate and start with one.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. So I want to I'm looking in the questions just to make sure that we have about 20 minutes left. I want to make sure we're making all of it. One question is the Stanford study available? Where is the psych recovery skills curriculum from? Was there a particular yoga sensitive training program that you used?
Yes.
That's lots of questions.
The Stanford study is available, and I will have to get that from Adrian. I don't even actually have a copy of the final survey because I had left before the final survey was submitted. Tell me the second part of the question, Jen. I got distracted by a question on the chat.
I'm like, she's being so thoughtful. I'm just going to let her sit in that. Okay, where is the psych recovery skills curriculum from?
Oh, okay, so the skills for psychological recovery came from an international team of folks. Many of them were from the Veterans Department who went worldwide to Kosovo. They were called in after 9/11. And I can send you a link to learn more about the skills for psychological recovery. I'll send that to Jennifer to share with you all. But it is a really robust curriculum with a lot of science behind it. And it is pretty much recognized worldwide as the second tier after that psychological first aid you get at the point of intervention. And then, did we approach the county human service department? Yes, they were amazing partners. So our county human services department, luckily we already had a great relationship with them, but boy, did it get more robust. And they actually received the FEMA money, and we wrapped around FEMA, and they actually were the boots on the ground advisors for FEMA's trauma immediate services. So FEMA gives you money and it puts out these care numbers that people can call. That number rang in county human services in the division that they set up. And the person who ran that was magnificent. And her team was really great. They're allowed to go out for up to 5 interventions to help people post-disaster, and then they have to refer them somewhere else. So we set up NAMI as a point of referral to community mental health services, and then NAMI could refer them in. NAMI had an updated schedule always of where were group therapy, who was an SPR trained therapist that would give free therapy to individuals or groups, where were the free yoga classes. They could link people to the app or the website. So NAMI was really our point of service intervention. And we also made sure the county human services people had that, and the folks at our United Way 211 number, because United Way was also promoting their 211 number. So we wanted to make sure no matter which portal people went to, they had it. We also partnered with the Long-Term Recovery Center, which after your disaster, you will get one of those if you didn't have one before. And we stayed in constant contact with them to make sure they knew what we were doing, because people will go to the Long-Term Recovery Center for home rebuilding and for other long-term resources. And they often will identify, wow, this person's really in need. And we wanted to make sure they knew how to refer to the services too.
Debbie, I have a question about the FEMA funds that went into the county. Is that the grant counties have to request from FEMA? Because they have to actually request it to get it, correct?
Yes. And our county human services department was so fabulous at executing the grant, and they measured, it was interesting. They didn't just measure the output of how many people they visited. We actually worked with them, and they were measuring outcomes of getting people into services, how many people went to the services, and then if people were seeing benefit outcomes from those services. So they were able to re-up for the grant, which is really unusual. But Sonoma County's Department of Human Services was amazing. So I would have if you have a relationship with your county human services, encourage them to reach out to Sonoma County's team to find out about that, because they were just A+ at how they executed.
Well, that's really helpful in an area like ours where we've had a major fire every year, at least. I think we had 3 this year. I think we went 1 year without a major fire here. And we didn't, then we still, the campfire happened. So we still held the smoke for 2 weeks from the campfire, which for a lot of people was very upsetting and triggered their trauma all over again, because it was 13 months after our disaster. We just started to come out. And then we were blanketed in smoke and the same smells and sights, and that's tough. I
actually was on the top of a mountain doing a forest bathing meditation hike with our funders the day the smoke came in. And it could not have honestly been better in a way, because it was like everybody got triggered, everybody paused. We're on a forest bathing meditative hike around triggers, and we were like, this is why people need this. And literally the smoke came in, it was so thick that we had a hard time getting down off the mountain. And of course, we're all calling when we got off the mountain to understand, are we on fire? Where's it coming from? What's going on? So it was a beautiful illustration to business people of mental health triggers and why what they were paying for was really very valuable.
And so that's an important part too that you're talking about. You were going after private sector for some donations to support your efforts, which meant that you were not only partnering with the county, but you were making sure that you were soliciting donations from the private sector as well. So.
We raised just over $1 million from the private sector. And most of that was from large grant-making organizations outside of the community. We were really, really fortunate to, be nestled in the San Francisco Bay Area. And Tipping Point was amazing. They were a great lead donor. And then, of course, the local community foundation stepped up with some resources to support. And then a lot of individual corporate and individual donors to a, obviously to a much smaller degree, but also very helpful.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have other questions? I think we're okay. Debbie, this is recorded, so that's the good news. If you could share the little presentation you wanted to do, because I think we have just enough time to do that. And if it brings up any other questions, we can make sure we get them.
Okay, so let me go here. This was something we developed when I was at the Healthcare Foundation. I don't know if the YouTube link will work. It's a very moving video. So we started a lot of our presentations with this video. I'll come back to it at the end. Again, here were our goals. And this was really important. We wanted to make sure that the strategies crossed what could people do for themselves where were the therapeutic interventions and what was at the macro community level. And so on the therapeutic interventions, we also reached into neighborhoods and worked with neighborhood captains. So a couple of our supervisors, which is our word for county commissioners, county elected official, had done a really good job at setting up neighborhood captains, and we went in and worked with the neighborhood captains to do some training with them and to make sure they knew of the tools. We also tried to work with the clergy. The clergy in Sonoma County was very diffused and hard to get to, but when we could get to them, we included them in the trainings. And then, as Jennifer noted, first responders. What could we do with first responders too? And you've seen these screenshots. And then this was just an update, kind of a midpoint where we were. And then I wanted you to see the partners, because I bet you have some of these partners. And so it was the local psychological association, the MFT association. They were a beautiful partner and did a lot of the leading of the therapeutic groups. The California Hope program, that was the name of the FEMA funded local program. So FEMA gives the money to the state gives it to the county. That was our Department of Human Services team that ran the California Hope program. NAMI, amazing partner, and then us as the Healthcare Foundation, the Department of Health Services, the Behavioral Health Division, the Office of Recovery and Resiliency. Most counties are now establishing those. They were a great partner to help distribute information. The Rebuilding Our Community, that was our long-term recovery center. And then, I've got a couple of other slides here of other partners, including Jennifer's group and many others that were helping us piece by piece. But I wanted you to get a sense of, when you look at your strategies, try to think about what can you do for individuals, what can you do for professionals that could then help individuals, whether it's clergy or mental health professionals, and then what can you do kind of at that macro level. And don't forget about the neighborhood captains, because somebody earlier said, oh, we try to watch Facebook groups and we respond. We did that too. So our intern was paid to literally pay attention to all the Facebook groups and say, hey, go here, go to NAMI. Hey, have you tried this? Have you tried that? And constantly put the interventions in front of people, because, they're looking when they need them. They aren't always paying attention otherwise.
Debbie, we can actually link your video underneath this one on our YouTube page so that it's in the comments. So if anybody, I think that would be great. I think it's really important to have that.
Okay, let me go back and see if it will let me, let's see if it'll let us watch it.
Sometimes I've noticed on YouTube videos, when you try to show them during Zoom, they don't sound good. They don't sound very good.
They get bifurcated. So, what is it called? Buffered.
Yeah,
okay.
It's odd.
I'll put the link. Let me see if it'll let me copy and put the link in the chat.
Okay.
And then you'll have the link at least.
We will absolutely share the deck, this video, and any other resources that Debbie sends our way. Do look at the Northern County Community Foundation. I did link that in the invite for this call so that you could look at Debbie's work. She's since left Sonoma County, which we're very sad about, but we understand she is a Floridian. And then just today we were recording a podcast. She did mention that she'll take hurricanes any day over fires, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That week of planning ahead means everything. And I do believe that the Healthcare Foundation of Northern Sonoma County still has a lot of good information about the fire recovery and is still doing a lot of the mental health work. I'm also going to send to Jennifer, Dr. Adrian Hines information. Adrian needs all of the credit for all of the content of these mental health tools. She's done an amazing job with them.
I will say this, though, that I just want to stress over and over again, we've already had one of these calls on the importance of organizing from a community perspective with captains and zone captains. So I'm very happy that both the areas, CZU and Almeda Fire, are taking that charge and adapting it to what will work for their community. And I want to also stress that Debbie, like me, was really like looking at long-term, designed to be actually more active 6 months to a year later than in the first immediate moments following the fire. That is such an important space to make sure that somebody, or it takes a number of somebodies to step up into that space. It is often when the biggest needs arise, like, am I going to rebuild? Am I not going to rebuild? What does that look like? Or I'm all of a sudden, like Debbie mentioned, I do need the mental health care that I didn't want to take, out the gate, but now I can, step into that space. Making sure that you reserve some of your funds and some of your energy for the very long term, because remember, this is a marathon you did not train for. And so in the first, you're like running, you're going, you're like, yeah, but then you might fall down. And so you need to make sure that you pace yourself enough so that you can be there. If you're committed to be there for the long term, that you bear that in mind and how you're looking at it. It's years long recovery is. So important. And that Debbie's role as a coordinator of all of these efforts is what made it come together. So she may want to be giving people credit. I love that she's giving other people credit, don't get me wrong, but she sat in the center of this massive effort. And I cannot stress enough that when you are in a community that is traumatized, as all of you are, knowing that you can access these different modes of care is a very big deal. And it's so, just knowing that alone as a layer of care, or, just the knowledge that it's there. So Debbie may be, selling it a little soft on herself, but she really was like the person that we all turned to, and we're just sort of amazed to watch that she could coordinate all of those efforts and be so effective. And we knew that kids and seniors and, no matter where you were, that you had access. So yeah, one of my heroes.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. If there's anything I can do to help you all, if you have questions down the road, I will type my current contact information in there so you have it. And, I'm happy to share whatever I can share at any point that would help your journey. We've all got to be in this together, because there's just so much learning. And, there are a lot of things we did right. There are a lot of things we didn't do right. And, being transparent about that, I think, just helps everybody. So
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
About to wrap. Hi, I'm Nicole. I'm Tucker's assistant. I've been listening in and also working on some other things here. So thank you for all this information. I know he took some notes and I took some notes, but I have a question just more on a personal note of, for both you, Debbie, and you, Jennifer, of, what resources did you use, of course, besides the one, I'm sure, Debbie, that you were setting up, for just supporting your own mental health in managing, especially I find the deeper we go, or the deeper I go, the more empathy that comes forward. And like, it can be freaking exhausting, and like how, especially, I know that it's a very different year this year with COVID and with just the distance we have, especially within our community. But of course you can use the own resources that you set up, but are there any things that you're aware of that are available for people that are doing relief work or long-term recovery work, specifically, that I can pass along to team members and especially like other caseworkers in the area, that maybe is more geared towards, not just the community? And I know that any mental health
a couple of things. I tried to go to the yoga classes at least once every couple of weeks myself. Couldn't always get there, but boy, when I did I feel fabulous. I also started using an app, which I personally really love, Headspace.
I use that too. Sorry, I use that too.
Yeah, I love that app. And then honestly, I I developed a relationship with a psychologist, and I went every 3 weeks, and I had a 2-hour appointment, and I talked about the professional piece, and then I talked about the personal piece. And I was on a panel right before I moved from Sonoma County, and actually several times I was on panels where they asked basically what you just asked, and everybody on the panel had a mental health professional. Everybody on the panel said, I'm not ashamed to admit it. I'm proud to say I'm taking care of my mental health, and I have a relationship with a therapist, and that's, it's working. It's helpful. So I was really vocal about that because I wanted to walk the walk and to say to people, hey, I'm overwhelmed. If I don't raise $1 million, we can't do all these things we want to do in the community. And we were really stressed to try to do that on top of the other work we needed to fund and do, because we were a tiny little organization. So that's my answer. Jennifer probably has her own strategies.
My strategy was to get too stressed, gain 20 pounds. I struggled for the first, I worked constantly. I did not listen to my own mental health needs. I did not, I just kept going one more day to get one more thing done. And I found myself actually my blood pressure went up, and I found myself not being very, I was a little snippy at home too. And my husband would tell you that he had to be very, very, very supportive. And it was very challenging. And then I was actually at a lunch with Susan Farron, who started First Responders Resiliency, and it's peer-to-peer mental health, trauma-informed care, and it teaches, and she does for first responders, and then also for their families. It's different programs. So I was hyperventilating over this issue I was having, being hunted by this writer, if you want to call it that, this person. And I started to really just melt at the table. And she was like, hold on, we're not talking about first responders or rebuild anymore. We're going to talk about you. And she wrote out on she turned her paper over and she wrote it out for me. She's like, here's what you're going to do. You're going to put your legs up for, at least 5 minutes, hopefully 20 minutes a day. And then you're going to meditate. You're going to start with a minute, and that's going to be hard, but then you're going to work your way through it. You're going to learn about deep breathing. You're going to do this box breath thing. And I'm going to teach you how to do it right here at this table. So she did, right? And I also got a trauma-informed therapist. Unfortunately, he went on to have a heart attack, and so that he's fine. He lived. He's fine. But so that was helpful too. I needed that. So since that time, so that was about 1.5 years ago, I use Headspace as well. I love that app. It's very for someone who has always had monkey mind and went 50 years without meditating, I have to tell you, I love it. I got a yoga trapeze. I hang upside down and then my yoga trapeze, and I swing on it like an 8-year-old, and I listen to music. I exercise because I also stopped exercising a lot. I was not taking care of myself like that. And I've lost the 20 pounds now, but that was, I had to force that on myself because I definitely just wanted to eat a lot of carbs and work. And I had to pay attention. And now I actually use a VR headset too. Also for meditation, I use a program called Supernatural. So I am aggressively going after and to maintaining my own mental health, because it's true. Your empathy can turn you inside out, and you don't want to, you can't do this work if you're not empathetic. But if you're empathetic all of the time, then you can easily find yourself with absolutely nothing left at the end of the day. And as I mentioned earlier, Debbie and I both know people who gave everything and then could not continue on and had substance abuse issues or got very, very ill. And so it's if you don't you have to prioritize helping the helpers so they can be there for you, in the long term. I cannot stress it enough. Forest bathing is something that Deb mentioned that I think is really important, because if you live near the wilderness and fire comes and fire did something terrible to you. And so going back into that forest and seeing how the earth handles it is actually incredibly therapeutic. You're like, oh, okay, so fire's sad for me, not necessarily sad for the earth. So, you know, and I have a keychain that says fire good, but also bad. And I carry that every single day. So I think you have to have a number of strategies and they have to evolve. And like what Deb was talking about, she gave people a lot of different options for how to walk through this. And I cannot recommend more highly seeing how many options, like it was the Ecology Center in Sonoma Valley that put together these forest walks so that you could, they called them fire walks. And it really changed a lot of people's relationships with fire and the earth and what it means to burn down, which is a big deal. So, Debbie, go ahead.
A lot of people really verbalized how much they mourned the loss of their trees and their plants. So yes, I lost my home, I lost my possession. I'm going to figure out how to rebuild. It's 6 months later, I've gone to my scarred lot. I'm figuring out how to rebuild. But the tree we planted when we built the house 30 years ago burned down. Or, you know, my mom's whatever bushes that, you know, that when she died, I moved them to my yard. It was surprising how much people connected personally around the loss of their trees and plants. And so for them, forest bathing is a great experience. Forest bathing is also really good for people like Jennifer and me who do have monkey mind. It sort of forces you to just chill out and be in the beauty. So a lot of people who thought, oh, forest bathing, yeah, I can go on a hike. It's like, it's not a hike. It's a different experience. So that was really, really a cool thing to offer people.
I love that. Debbie, do you have any final thoughts or words? And we can finish up here. You've been awesome, which I knew you would be because you're just awesome, just who you are.
Oh, thank you. Well, I guess I would say leave your door open to partner with everyone and try to early on pull as many people as you can into rooms, even if it's virtual now, and really map out what do you do best and who do you connect with best. So as you're building your community resource quilt, you already know who's there and who they touch. And that would be a good thing. And then the last thing would be approach fundraising collaboratively. If you can create a coalition that together goes to big companies and big funders, and you show them the different pieces of the quilt that are available, they'll pick the pieces that match their missions, but they'll be more inclined to give you money and big money because they see the effort at collaboration instead of competition. So as a funder, I would tell you, I'd much rather see 30 nonprofits come together and ask for a huge sum of money that maybe I as one funder can't do, but that would inspire me to gather other funders to help do it.
That is excellent advice. Thank you. There's enough disaster to go around. Just remember that. There's no need to compete for, you know, the same slice, the same quilt. So, okay, all right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. Deb, thank you for joining us. Now it says 6:36 where you are. And we really appreciate your time and your heart and your energy and for sharing. Okay.
Good luck, everybody. Thank you for inviting me, Jen. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.